The number one reason people come to Reddit is to be informed by communities they trust and by people they trust. And the funny thing about these communities is they spend an awful lot of time talking about products and services themselves. So people are coming to Reddit for information, and that's the opportunity for brands.
Hello and welcome to the Perpetual Traffic Podcast. This is your host, Ralph Burns. This is the show where we share cutting-edge strategies on acquiring leads and sales to acquire more customers so you can achieve your vision as a business. And today we're talking about something, Kasim, we've never talked about. This rarely happens. The name of the show is Perpetual Traffic, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
That is the name. You've got it, Ralph.
That is the name of the show.
It took us almost 6 years, but I'm glad you've nailed this one.
Nailed it. Yep. Almost 7, actually. If you can believe that.
Is it almost 7?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Although it seems like longer than that for some of our listeners, maybe it seems longer. But the point is we've never talked about Reddit ever. I know you've used it a little bit, and we're a little bit skeptical to get this guy to come on today, but we're gonna run him through the ringer on why you should use Reddit, the Perpetual Traffic listener, whether you're a director of marketing or you're in the trenches buying media every single day, or you're a business owner, or you're a CEO for that matter. We do have CEOs who listen to this show because I'm a CEO and you're a CEO. And sometimes I like hearing us talk about CEO stuff, Kasim. But today we're going to be talking about this Reddit thing, which is a traffic source that not many people are talking about. And that's why we've got Evan here today. But I want to ask you something. There's something going on right now in Arizona. Are you aware of this thing called the World Series? Are you aware of
football? So. It's not showing up on my radar.
It's one of my favorite things is to ask you about sports and just see if you actually know anything. Like I wasn't quite sure if it was going to be golf or
the only reason I know the World Series exists is because people keep calling, messaging, or emailing me, asking me either to buy tickets or to sell tickets.
Right.
And so I'm going to turn into a broker because everybody's like, look, I bought 4 tickets, but I'm actually not going to go because they're 3-1 right now and I don't want to see it. And so they're trying to sell me the tickets. And 2 days before, somebody was trying to buy tickets. And I'm like, man, I could just sit here in the middle and maybe make a little bit of money. So if you want World Series tickets, call your local Phoenician.
That's right. Which isn't you, apparently. You're not a broker.
Yeah, I'm just not going to do it because I don't care.
I don't
want to get stuck holding the bag. You buy the tickets and then the guy or gal who promised they were going to buy them, decides not to, gets cold feet, the scores change or whatever. I don't know. I think there's a saying, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world he didn't exist, which I believe is true. But the second greatest trick is convincing people that baseball is a sport.
I think it's called the game of baseball. Actually, the game of golf. I'm incorrect in that. Baseball is considered a sport, but it's just a lot of standing around.
That's why you can't have you have unhealthy baseball players.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. Like Babe Ruth was on his 4th coronary, walked out on a walker. Yeah, it's like bowling. It's not. It's an involved break a sweat game, but it's not
bowling. They walk for 3 steps, and then they use their arm. It's kind of like a pitcher in baseball, but there is running involved, so there is that. But I was watching it last night. I'm like, I wonder if Kasim actually knows, because I knew we were recording today, that the World Series is going on. But by the way, your team is down 2-1. I'm just telling you. Not that you have
devastated, Ralph.
I
can't believe you'd ruin my. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, I do love that the United States wins the World Series every year. That's how good we are. We're the best. We're number 1.
It is amazing.
Yeah,
it's like an American football team winning the Super Bowl, the
every
Super
year.
Duper Bowl every year. There is no other bowl.
You can't get
Super Bowl. No. So talking about super stuff here today, we've got Evan Wolf from Reddit. This is going to be like the World Series episode of Reddit, I think, today, because we've never talked about it, and we're just going to exclaim it to be. So Evan Wolf is, I'm not sure actually what he does over there, but he does a lot with Reddit, and I know he knows a lot about advertising. So Evan Wolf from Reddit, to a highly skeptical Perpetual Traffic audience, welcome to Perpetual Traffic. And we're going to put you on the spot, right to start things off. What is your nugget that might be related to today's show regarding Reddit?
Well, thanks for having me. It might be helpful to begin with what Reddit is. So Reddit's a community of communities. It's over 100,000 communities, which, to put in perspective, I think there are about 120,000 city blocks in New York City. So if you imagine a New York City of communities, that's Reddit. And there are people discussing all sorts of topics on Reddit. Baseball, the World Series is a good example where sometimes, you got no one in your family and none of your friends care about baseball. A lot of people find that fan community on Reddit. And so my
Or maybe
nugget,
your traffic co-host, Perpetual Traffic co-host. I can't talk sports with him, so I would go to Reddit in case I just
That's
get
right.
completely offended by Kasim's lack of sports knowledge, is what you're telling me.
and you can find your people there, right? Because sometimes they're not, your family or your best friends that you end up sharing a lot of interests with. And so I think my nugget for this audience is to, check out our improved community search in our ads manager, because what that's going to let you do is take any topic or any category that you're a business in and see all the different communities that topic is being discussed in. I think sometimes there's some really obvious communities, right? Really endemic to every business and service. But then there's also these communities right next door to that community where you can find your kind of new customer.
So if I am interested in, as a business, like let's say I'm interested in targeting semiconductor executives for whatever reason, because I have a product that's going to revolutionize the semiconductor world. I'm trying not to be self-serving with the agency thing. I can find a community, go in there. Like, how do you approach it? Like, that's all well and good, because I started my internet marketing career by just going to forums and being
Right.
helpful and useful back then. And it actually did work. So let's say you find that community, not necessarily people who you're just interested in, because I have I could talk baseball all day with Kasim here. But, if I went over to Reddit, I could talk there, spend hours, but not really further my business. So I guess probably the people that are listening here are like, well, why should I go over to Reddit? Is it just that simple? Is there that many communities where I can find my ideal customer profile? And that's sort of your strategy.
There are that many conversations. There really are. And if you think about it, why did you use those forums back in the day? What was the value of them, do you think? Why did you go to that audience?
I was cheap and I didn't want to pay for advertising. And I forget who it was now off the top of my head, but Chris Brogan, I think it was. He said, just be helpful and useful. And then that way it'll come back to you. The law of reciprocity will work for you. And actually it did work. And that started this podcast here, which is we just give away a lot of information for free.
Well, that law of reciprocity is every day on Reddit. It's interesting that every second two people ask Reddit a question, but every question gets an average of 19 responses from those forums. And so what I think is so interesting, and perhaps why you came to forums and why we've, kind of come back to forums since the birth of the internet, is because at their core, they have real people in them who tend to be experts in these different areas. So we might have a small business community, we might have a software community. And oftentimes, even if we don't have a community dedicated to a subject, there's probably conversations taking place on Reddit about those specific subjects. And there's a lot of ways advertisers can find those. In addition to community search, we also can use keywords to find those conversations, because sometimes it's not just happening in one community, it's happening in a few different communities. An example is like if, you're a furniture maker, there's a lot of furniture and do-it-yourself communities, but there's also a lot of discussion of furniture in like travel communities, because people get inspired when they're traveling to look at furniture. But next door to kind of every community is another community. And we've just built out a lot of tools to help you find those conversations across the web.
Evan, when Elon bought Twitter, he ended up figuring out 20% of Twitter's accounts were fake, spam, bots, made up, let's say. With anything community driven, that's always maybe my biggest fear, is how do we get over spam traffic? How do we know when it is spam traffic? We're dealing with that with Google right now, and it's a nightmare. Just out of curiosity, do you have, and there's no good answer, but is there a soundbite you can offer as to how Reddit addresses that, figures it out, tries to weed those things out, etc.?
I mean, it's a challenge for every platform. Every platform has a spam problem that they're working to address. I think one of the ways that Reddit works is its incentives. I'll quote Bob Dylan here, who had a great quote that was, if someone's wearing a mask, they're probably telling you the truth. And if they're not wearing a mask, it's highly unlikely. And so I think the honesty of Reddit comes from its anonymity. And so as a result of that, a lot of what you see on the site and a lot of the conversations and discussions taking place are from real people. The other way I think Reddit has a nice solution is that its fundamental architecture, the upvote, downvote, kind of discourages spam pretty quickly. Within every community, in addition to having the ability to upvote and downvote content, they also have moderation systems in them. There are moderators in all communities, and in some of the bigger communities like r/science, you have teams of moderators who are looking after the content. So I think there are a couple ways. I mean, I think at its core, there's an incentive. There isn't as much incentive given the anonymity. But second, I think there's a lot of human curation that goes into Reddit that does a pretty good job at, sussing out what is a problem for every internet platform.
So we are here with Evan Wolf from Reddit, and we're talking about sort of the unpaid and non-advertising portion of the platform itself. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to get back into how to leverage those unpaid, it sounds like, advertising communities, but then also the advertising side, which I don't think Kasim and I know a whole lot about. We've spent a little bit of money, actually. I just pinged my VP of marketing. We have spent money on Reddit before, so I wasn't even aware of that. But so if you are in that category that you don't really know anything about it, this show is definitely for you. So stick around. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back with Evan Wolf from Reddit.
Welcome back to Perpetual Traffic. We're here talking about something we've never discussed before, which is a social media site is the way I'm going to characterize it. Evan, would you consider Reddit to be social media? You've been using the word forum, but it's such a deeply rooted social element to it.
Yeah, I think of it as a community of communities. It's not social insofar as it's not where you're going to go to connect with your friends and family. It is social in that it's a collection of human beings. And there is a very human element to Reddit that does make it social. But there's also an element to it that makes it very different than what I think we typically call social networks.
So speaking specifically to advertisers, if you were to pitch Reddit, where do you think it fits in the funnel? Question one. And then question two is, how is it best used? And I'll just pause there, but it sounds like you already have an answer.
Well, I think I'd start with why do people come to Reddit in the first place? And the number one reason people come to Reddit is to be informed by communities they trust and by people they trust. And the funny thing about these communities is they spend an awful lot of time talking about products and services themselves. So like, I'm a guitar player. I'm in a lot of guitar communities. And in these communities, we're not actually talking that much about like theory and practice. We're talking about guitars. We're like showing what we bought and talking about what we want to buy. And that's true, in communities like r/guitars, but it's also true in like small business communities where they might be talking about software or looking for advice on different challenges they're having. So people are coming to Reddit for information, and that's the opportunity for brands. What we hear often is that somebody becomes ready to buy after a session they have on Reddit, that they see something on Reddit, they read something on Reddit, and that gives them the confidence to go out and buy something. And so they end up, what advertisers tell us is they end up converting faster. And sometimes they end up spending more too as a result of that trust or faith they have in their purchase decision based on something they've read on Reddit.
But you can't pay for that, right? Like what you're talking about is real people with organic experiences going to Reddit and saying, hey, bought this guitar string, loved it, it was awesome, this is what I'd recommend. Whoever's producing those guitar strings benefits from that, but how do you manufacture that type of experience without losing out on the authenticity of, the organic thumbs up?
Well, I think brands have an authentic role to play in communities, and showing up in them is just the baseline. The value of a community comes from the members themselves. And I think advertisers have a huge role to play in that. I remember growing up, I would read Vintage Guitar Magazine. It was like this giant publication. I never read a single article in that magazine. I just looked at the advertisements, right? But when I saw one of those advertisers somewhere else, it had credibility because I recognized it from my community. And that happens every day on Reddit, where you have advertisers who are generating awareness, they're generating sales in communities. And when someone goes out in the world and maybe they even see an ad from that advertiser on another platform, they say, hey, I recognize that brand. I recognize that company from my community. I've got a little more faith. I've got a little more trust. I'm going to be a little bit more faster to convert.
I might not follow. Is the advertiser creating the community or participating in the community, or a little of both?
A little of both. They're coming with information. I'll give you an example. One of our most popular Ask Me Anything was from a vacuum repair person at a vacuum company. And sometimes that level of information can come from all different parts of the company. But somebody who worked at a vacuum repair company came and they did an Ask Me Anything with a repair community. One of our most popular Ask Me Anythings of all time. If you don't know what that is, because I know Ralph is new to Reddit, but this is a famous structure on Reddit where someone will come on and the community will ask questions and that individual organization will answer them.
Got it. So aside from for example, let's use the guitar community. So if I work at Gibson Guitars or Fender or whatever it happens to be, and I come in and I'm, it's clear my strategy, like I am unfamiliar with Reddit because I don't use it. There's only a certain amount of time in the day, and there's a lot of social networks. I know this is a community within a community, all that sort of stuff. But so you sort of have to pick and choose. I understand sort of where you're going, but how do you come across, and maybe this is sort of a self-descriptive question, because I struggled this when I first started, when I used forums as a way in which to get business, is if I'm a guitar representative and I work at Gibson and I go into the guitar forum, how do you approach it? We haven't even talked about the advertising side. How do you approach it so that you don't come across as like, oh, well, what you should do is you should buy this Gibson product or whatever it happens to be. I don't even know if Gibson makes strings, but let's just say for the sake of argument, that's the case. So how do you sort of balance the pitch with being just helpful and useful inside the community, especially if you're one of those 17 to 19 answer people when somebody asks a question?
Well, I think that one way is, you can provide out value and bring information. But the other way to approach it is to bring curiosity and ask questions. And you can actually learn a lot about your target community by talking with them on Reddit, thinking about that community as a focus group. I once saw a small business owner, it's a chain of guitar stores, but they approached a guitar forum and they said, hey, we're seeing a lot of these different guitars come in through trade-in. What are the features that you really appreciate in this guitar? And everyone in the community started saying like, hey, we really like the black pick guard. And we really like the shape of this year's neck. And we like this bridge. And they started giving all of this rich feedback to the company around what exactly about that make and model they appreciated. And that level of focus group, I think, is happening on Reddit across all different verticals every different day. I mean, it's free R&D across 100,000 communities on Reddit.
The approach of trying to infiltrate the community scares me a little, to the point that Ralph is making, but I actually really like the idea of using it for R&D. Like if you got real Socratic and you wanted to learn, or you're, doing product development, or you're trying to iterate, or you want to change, and you're receptive to that input, I think that could be a really, I absolutely see the use case. I'm on Visual Capitalist right now, and it says that Reddit's one of the top 20 websites in the world. So it has the traffic to support that approach for just about anybody in any industry. Here's my mild fear, though, and I'm not trying to be combative. It's just my experience with Reddit is Reddit users are mean. I have always said it's the smartest, meanest people on the internet. And so if you put yourself out there in those ways, have you seen advertisers sort of lose the reins a little bit and things get kind of, play runaway train? And if that happens, how do you bring it back?
I think, in the realm of advertising, we have lots of controls, right? Like simple things like you can turn comments on and off. But I also experience Reddit as a supportive, kind place in many, many different instances and communities. I don't think there's this, I know there's just always fear of like brands not welcome here in so many different forums and in so many different communities online. I don't experience that on Reddit. That's not what we hear from our advertisers. I think, again, it comes down to a little bit of relevance and coming with some value. But it's definitely a place that I think is welcoming to brands.
You've got to be very careful in your approach, though, it would seem. I mean, human nature doesn't really change all that much. So, I mean, I'm sort of equating what you're talking about back to the forum days. And it was literally like I was desperate. Like I had no way. I mean, I used to hang around in bookstores in front of like the website section. Somebody picked up a book on like how to build a website. I'd hand them my card. Like that's how desperate I was.
Dude, that's so funny.
I swear to God, I did.
That's a pro tip right there, man. I really like that.
No, I share that.
I was broke, dude. So Chamber of Commerce, I think it was like $100 a year. Business Networking International, that was like $250 or something like that. It was crazy money back then. The point is like I was doing whatever I could. So I didn't have much money, but I did have a lot of time. And my wife was pressuring me to go back and join the corporate world and get a real job as opposed to starting this damn thing. But the point is that I struggled with that. I was like, I really did want to help. But as soon as I sort of stepped back and I believe it was Chris Brogan's advice, now that I sort of come to think of it, because I don't even know where he's at right now. We should probably have him on the show at some point in time. But anyway, the point is like, as soon as I really just genuinely wanted to help people, and it took a while, then I started getting emails or requests for like a direct, hey, do you have an email? Like I have a problem here. And I probably picked up a couple of clients. I forget exactly whether or not that was the case, but like if people are doing it for a business purpose, I think you've got to be very, very careful with it. Is it safe to assume like my approach and what I'm saying is accurate? I do love the R&D aspect of it as well, which is, people love to seem smart and answer questions, especially, if you have somewhat of a commercial intent. But is that safe to assume that that's the right approach inside Reddit?
Well, what are you worried about? What is it that you're, in your fantasy, Ralph? What do you think could happen?
Like the worst case scenario?
Not the worst case scenario, but why wouldn't brands be welcome?
Because they have something to sell. And I think your motivation to do the right thing and give the right answer might be outweighed by your commercial intent.
Right.
So therefore, your answers might not be the best in the world because they're slanted and skewed towards your worldview of the company that you represent.
I think, though, that's actually why brands should show up. Because so much of the time people are coming to Reddit to try to make a purchase decision. And the holder of that information is the company itself, is the organization trying to make a sale. One of the searches I was recently doing is I wanted a set of headphones for planes. I didn't want it to be the kind that you had to charge. I wanted to be able to plug it into the entertainment system. I had like this laundry list of things I was looking for with a set of headphones. And when you start putting those queries together on the internet, no matter which engine you're using, oftentimes the answer leads back to Reddit because those kind of searches, the best conversations about those questions take place on Reddit. And I think that's exactly where, if you're a headphone company, you want to be with the right information and trying to make a sale. I hear what you're saying, but so much of the actual conversation on Reddit is commercial by nature that I would actually say that it's one of the more appropriate places on the internet to try to make a sale, as opposed to all the other places I spend my time that are kind of not that commercial in nature. Where on Reddit, I think these companies do have an opportunity to be contextually relevant and helpful, and straight up trying to make a sale, because at the end of the day, the user is trying to make a purchase and just trying to buy the right thing.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I think, I think at the end of the day, a lot of the problems that are solved by people's questions end up with the purchase of a product. So there is that. I mean, the logical resolution of a problem solved is, a next step is an acquisition. Like coming from the sales world.
This is probably why Reddit doesn't want to view itself as a social channel, because brands on social get flamed. And you see this right on Instagram. Like if a brand tries to contribute to the conversation in Instagram, they just get like annihilated right out of the gate from all angles. So the repositioning is probably helpful there. I am curious though, Evan, it feels like you're pushing really hard in the organic, which is surprising, but not in a bad way. I think it's kind of cool. I'm curious why the push isn't towards paid ads. Like Reddit needs to monetize, right? And yet your soapbox is mostly like, hey, go in, contribute, provide value. Why aren't you selling us on buy traffic?
In all these cases, it can be ads, right? All of these instances I'm describing, like being there where there's a purchase decision, being contextually relevant, finding communities that are talking about your products and services, all of those are setups to be able to place an ad. And at its best, I think our ads do function much like the rest of the content on Reddit. We have a placement, for example, called the conversation placement, which you can keyword target right into these conversations where somebody might be talking about your service. Maybe someone's making a B2B software decision and they're discussing the best AI, CRM, etc. We have the ability to find that discussion and put your company there and drive traffic from that discussion.
Yeah, so while we're talking, I'm just sitting here scrolling around Reddit and jumping into various subreddits. It does feel like all of the paid placement is in line. So, there's every now and again, maybe an ad off in the margin, but for the most part, I'm scrolling through and looking at people's comments and responses, and the ads are difficult to distinguish between, what's paid and what's organic, which I think could be pretty helpful for an advertiser, because like you're saying, you just get to sneak right into the conversation. With that in mind, what works best? Like if you were to give us best practices, let's say a listener's like, you know what, I want to give Evan a shot. I believe what he's saying. How do I go in there and like, what is it? If you've got the 7 ways or the 6 things, I imagine there's got to be an SOP as to how to give this a first attempt.
Yeah. The first thing is, play around on Reddit like you're doing. I think, some folks have played on Reddit. Some folks like Ralph may have not. I think you can figure out how the site works pretty quickly. So I'd start there by downloading the app and starting to use it. The second thing, I would use our community search to see where your topic, your brand, your category is being discussed across Reddit.
Are you allowed to advertise in any Reddit community, or is it like YouTube where some have monetization enabled and some don't?
Some have monetization and some don't.
Okay. And how do you know which is which?
You'll see what's available in the Ads Manager platform.
Got it. And so I've tried to log into the Ads Manager and it wanted me to jump it through some hoops. Is there a way to see the Ad Manager delineation the way that Facebook makes theirs available, or do you have to register as an advertiser first?
I think you have to sign up as an advertiser.
Okay. Cool. So you go into Reddit, you see what communities are available that have monetization enabled, learn the platform. And then from an ad perspective, like we know what to say with things like Facebook and Instagram because it's top of funnel and a lot of that is basically info marketing. Is it the same thing more or less in Reddit, or what do you see work for other advertisers?
When it comes to creative, I have a belief that great creative is great creative. I know there's another school of thought that every platform is different and it has to be super nuanced. And we do have creative best practices. There are ways to use some of the language of Reddit. There are ways to just look more organic, for example, in the conversation placement. But when it comes to actual copy, when it comes to images, when it comes to formats, I think great creative is great creative. And if you have something that's working on other platforms, I would give that creative a shot on Reddit.
So how would that transition over? Most like if something's video based or carousel based, Reddit seems to be almost exclusively text based on my 9 seconds of browsing here. So A, correct me if I'm wrong, and then B, let me know how you would translate.
Yeah, we have
those.
different formats. Different formats. So I think what you're looking at is our conversation placement.
Right.
But we can accept just about any storytelling format that you might be using.
Does that break continuity if I start using videos when people are used to Reddit being more message threads?
I think it depends on the content and targeting. There's plenty of video being shared on Reddit. I don't think it is just a text-based platform. Depends on your goals and your objective, but there are plenty of videos and images on Reddit. For a keyword targeted campaign with a lower funnel objective, that's where like a conversation placement is going to be really effective. But let's say you're launching a new software product and you're trying to generate awareness. In that instance, you're probably going to be using perhaps video. Maybe you're targeting a broad set of communities based on what our community search is recommending, saying, hey, these are the communities where your topic or your product or your service is being discussed. So advertisers will take those, they'll build out a campaign and they'll target those, for example, for a product launch.
Got it. And as I'm scrolling through here, I see Google Cloud is advertising, Apple's advertising. And a lot of it feels very, it reminds me of like the Google Display Network and the way that they're currently utilizing specifically the feed and the ads in the feed. Can you segment or target people demographically or psychographically? Are there interest-based segmentations, or is it just community segmentation?
No, there are ways to segment by interests. We also have advertisers who create their own custom audiences and bring them over to Reddit. You mentioned you had run a retargeting campaign, I believe.
Yeah, so you can create custom audiences based off of, and I know this because we've used Reddit for this purpose. We targeted everybody who landed on our challenge page but didn't convert.
Yeah.
And we were able to use the Reddit pixel in that way. I have no idea how well it worked, to be honest with you, because we were just running as much traffic as we possibly could everywhere. What does the cost of Reddit traffic look like compared to other ad networks?
Depends on the category. I think there's some categories where, gosh, Reddit is a massive value. If I can't break down the numbers, but I know that there are some categories, and especially during the holidays, like the holidays are a good example too, where you see certain, CPA spike in different areas of the internet. I think Reddit is a great place to look to diversify a bit, break away from your competition. I can't break out the numbers, but given the depth and breadth of Reddit communities, I think there are some value nuggets out there that advertisers just haven't found yet.
And is it CPM based, CPC?
Yes, you can buy on a CPM, you can buy for awareness, you can buy on traffic, CPC.
And what about conversion tracking and attribution?
We have conversion tracking. We have advertisers who buy for max conversion. So we have a lot of advertisers running with lower funnel objectives on the site.
And any opportunity, or maybe this is on the horizon, but for in-app purchases, the way that I'm going to use a dirty word, Evan, but the way that other social networks are, trying to build more continuity within the application. Is there anything rolling out in Reddit that would allow advertisers to have, if not a purchase, but like a Facebook lead form or a Google lead form or?
Yeah, we're building in this area. Don't have something I can announce here, but we're definitely building in this area. We know that so many different people discover apps on Reddit. And we know that many of those owners of those apps want to reach Reddit users once they've downloaded the app as well.
How about from a pure performance, like top of funnel kind of, like you mentioned, conversion objective, or at least, acquisition at bottom of funnel? Is there an opportunity for advertisers, like performance-based advertisers, performance marketers just in general to go top of funnel here. Like we've talked about it as a retargeting tool, which obviously sounds like it's fairly cost effective, although we don't necessarily have data to show or prove. But like at top of funnel, they're always looking for, you say good creative is good creative no matter where it is. So like on Facebook, for example, it's interruption marketing. It's very, very similar to what we're talking about here. A lot of these forums, it really is like I see these huge companies basically doing a lot of brand advertising. I suppose I haven't clicked on any of the ads yet, but the point is that like I see that value. Hey, I'm going to remind you that I'm here. I'm in the marketing forum. Salesforce is advertising in there. Apple is talking about like an AI technology because AI was one of the interests that I mentioned. But like from a top funnel, smaller brands, I don't see much of those like performance marketers. Like what can you talk to about that? Any case studies specifically or results that you can divulge as far as Reddit performance goes? I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I think we do have one of the unique products we have is what we call a category takeover, which is a takeover, but it's across what is a unique set of communities that advertisers can put together. So I'm sure you remember from the portal days, the massive takeovers, right? The front page of Yahoo, I remember in 2010 was, the ultimate online ad placement. But there was never anything between like the Yahoo takeover and like a $6 CPM buy. And I think one of the unique placements on Reddit is our category takeover, where an advertiser, let's say you're Ally Financial and you've got a new financial services product that you're launching, a new savings account. You can stitch together, for example, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 communities that are focused on financial services, that are focused on financial health, and you'll do like a one-day takeover in those communities. So it's that same kind of like high impact of like the big Yahoo takeover, but on a way more targeted front. And every day we have, thousands of these different takeovers going off. And I think that's one of the unique ways where you can kind of have a blockbuster placement, but be really, really, really targeted with it. And there's a lot of waste when you're right on the front page or the portal, in 2010, where this kind of gives you the reach of that placement, but with a much more targeted audience.
This is actually pretty cool, Ralph. Check this out. So playing with Reddit, and most of it is brand building. But then I just saw an ad from Adobe that I think is, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can go to perpetualtraffic.com/YouTube to see the videos. Here's an ad from Adobe. Photographer Koki Yamaguchi works with every kind of light to create dreamy scenes. Pick up some of his quick Lightroom tips to see how you can too. And so there's 4 images in a carousel showing different types of lighting. And then, of course, the call to action is learn more about Adobe. And that, to me, is reminiscent of top of funnel info marketing within a social sphere. 100%. You could take your Facebook and or Instagram ads and kind of carry them over, and they'd be analogous more or less, as long as the targeting is there. And that's the thing I want to go play with Reddit is because I think targeting is more important than messaging or offer. I know I'm the only one, and I know Alex Hormozi would shoot me in the face for saying that. But I think, to be honest with you, history has proven that to be true. It's why so many people made so much money between, 2012 and 2020. When was iOS 14? 2021, whenever that happened.
21.
Yeah. It's because we were able to target with unbelievable levels of reliability. And the Reddit segmentation is pretty cool. Like these communities get ultra niche. And if you can go just inject yourself in some of these niche communities, again, without getting flamed for it, I think that there'd be some value in pushing your message in front of folks, especially if it's value first messaging.
I would agree with that. I mean, I see, the amount of communities that could be directly related to like the kind of the stuff that we do is yeah, you get your best creative that you get from another platform and really focus. Like your first test to me would seem like, I mean, I hate to say it, but I would want to do like all text ads just to test that, just to start off with very, very focused retargeting or some kind of tip or learn more or something like that top of funnel, because I gotta figure, like, if you go too commercial, too hard sell, you're gonna get just torn apart. So I do see that as, and this is anathema for me to say, and that's the biggest word I think I've said on this podcast.
I gotta go Google that
a few times. I just figured I'd keep up with your vocabulary here, Kasim. But is that targeting on this platform would be the first thing that I would go after, as opposed to the creative. Although creative is obviously, as it's so important with everything else aside from Google Ads. I think right now, maybe like let's talk Google Performance Max, but like on the Facebook side, it's everything. I mean, it is the new targeting. But here, I would go targeting first, low level ads, and then branch out from there. I don't know. Maybe Evan has something to say on that, but that's just my sort of first blush at taking a look at this for the first, especially on the ad platform for the last 20 minutes or so.
I think that's right. I think the contextual targeting is what you're going to see that's really different here, and that's what's super valuable. I would start there too.
So I guess going back to this, all right. So we've talked about like how to approach potentially top of funnel, how to be helpful, useful organically, how to go into advertising direct response. We didn't really talk about the retargeting side, which sort of seems like that's an easy one, especially if you're running any amount of traffic here. And I mean, Kasim, you said like you're not really spending a whole lot, although you guys, have large lists to a certain degree. Like, if you use retargeting here, do you have any idea of how you were actually doing your targeting, or was it just like broad based, just like shotgun approach? Or maybe Evan can even answer that question. If you were doing retargeting at lower funnel, like, I went to the application page and then I abandoned, or, certain pages on your website and then I abandoned. Like, where do you want to start? And what kind of budgets do you want? Do you want to go broad? Do you want to go narrow? Like, what's your recommendation?
I would go broad. One of the things that you're going to find, and I'll kind of leave you with this advice, is that the audience on Reddit often doesn't have that much overlap with the other platforms. And so that's where I think it can be super valuable in the context of retargeting, is that, that person who visited your site and took off, there's a good opportunity to find them on Reddit. And if you miss them on Reddit, you might not find them anywhere else.
She's saying there's not a whole lot of overlap. Is that, like you said, like the Meta, the Instagram user? Let's just take that. There's not as much overlap with those sites as with Reddit, because that doesn't seem quite right to me.
There are many people, who spend a lot of time on Reddit who may not be on Instagram. Who
Dude, I
may
couldn't
not
buy
be...
that. The people that I know that are in Reddit are just Redditors. Like, that's what they do. And they just live there, and that's their space in the world. And this is so anecdotal, but I'm thinking about two humans in particular, both of whom we should actually have on the show.
Yeah.
And they're actually repelled by social media, which is why Reddit's a good, the unsocial narrative kind of matches, because it still gives them that outlet. Like, they get to be around people digitally and pretend that they're not in a social media platform. So I buy that entirely. I think Reddit is one of those corners or pockets of the world that kind of carved out its own personality, and it doesn't. The Venn diagram obviously crosses over a little, but I don't think it crosses over nearly as much as, say, Instagram and YouTube might.
So if that's the case, if you're traditionally advertising Meta Google, let's just pick the 80% of the digital advertising world, then retargeting really is a waste of money on Reddit.
Or you're getting a whole new pocket, a whole new audience.
But if you're doing retargeting, that assumes that they're bottom of funnel.
Oh, I see what you're saying. If all of your top of funnel is just Facebook, Instagram, etc., then retargeting becomes, I guess, then you get to test this assumption. You get to see how many of your Facebook audience is in Reddit. But yeah, if the assumption tests out, then you're probably right.
And we find most advertisers are doing both. They might be doing retargeting on Reddit, but there's also prospecting happen. Most advertisers are using more than one objective often on the site.
Do you have data that backs up that statement about, because that's an interesting, because from an expansion standpoint, from a scale standpoint, it's like, all right, well, you've got all these visitors, depending on what your niche is. I mean, your niche might be doubling down, tripling down on Reddit, and you're advertising on Meta or Google, and you think you're getting everybody when in fact you're missing the boat because your audience is a Reddit audience. And that's an interesting proposition right there. Or, you are getting a fair amount of traffic over on the other sites, but then you're looking for expansion opportunities. So Reddit is a blue ocean for you.
Evan, appreciate you hopping in. Apologize for our initial skepticism. I'm sure you can understand. New ad networks terrify advertisers. I'm interested, though. I think you've done a really good job at outlining the benefits. I am going to play around with the segmentation. Let's say I wanted to get started right now today. What's step one in your mind?
Download the app, check out the ads manager, see which communities are talking about your product and service, play around with targeting, and win some new customers that you might not get anywhere else.
That's great. We appreciate you coming on the show, man. You've been awesome.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. For the skeptical audience that is Perpetual Traffic here, it's fascinating how much is in here. I would say the play aspect is certainly something that you should do and a big recommendation. So I'm going to ask you where people can get a hold of you, but I have to assume it's at reddit.com, or is there another way to connect with you?
ads.reddit.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, make sure that wherever you are listening, make sure that you subscribe, leave a rating. Let us know what we can do better. Make some comments. We haven't talked about any of the recent reviews, Kasim. We have to do that on the next show. We keep saying that at the end. Make sure that you do follow myself over on LinkedIn and Kasim at Kasim Aslam on all the socials. And yes, follow us on perpetualtraffic.com/YouTube, our YouTube channel. Definitely check that out. We're getting quite a few subscribers these days, Kasim, which is pretty exciting. All resources and show notes are over at perpetualtraffic.com. On behalf of my awesome co-host, Kasim Aslam.
Peace.
Until next show, see ya.